What makes the biggest difference in student success? Research says it's not just individual effort, it's collective teacher efficacy, the shared belief among educators that they can help every student thrive. Welcome to the Efficacious Educator Podcast, where we uncover the stories behind this powerful idea. I'm your host, Sarah Bialek, and in each episode we'll interview teachers and school leaders who tackle big challenges by working together. Discover what it takes to create lasting solutions, build trust, and transform school communities. This is the Efficacious Educator Podcast, building better schools one collective solution at a time. Let's get started. Our Efficacious Educator today is Demetrius Fuller. For 20 years, Demetrius has taught art, and now he is the newly minted assistant principal at Sokolowski Elementary School in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Sokolowski is an urban elementary school serving 500 students in grades 1 through 4. 70% of students speak English as a second language. 90% qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 85% identify as Latino. Demetrius recently co-wrote an article in the Phi Delta Kappan, taking homies from the classroom to the whole school, with his former principal, Nate Myers, and his leadership coach, Linda Nathan. I will link the article in the show notes. Homies is written as capital HOM, lowercase IES. The HOM standing for habits of mind, and the homies representing 8 characters that embody critical habits of mind that support students to grow as learners. Demetrius is a public artist. He was the principal artist on the Chelsea Right Now public art series. He is a Perone Sizer Institute for Creative Leadership cohort member. He's active in Fringe Theater in the Apollinaire Theater Company. He does the acting, music, and sets. He's a little bit of a do-it-all when it comes to the theater. He also has the Flying Squirrel Puppet Theater that he wrote, directed, and performed in for 10 years, collaborating with musicians from the Berklee College of Music. And he also ran a summer program called Da Vinci's Notebook, where it's the nexus of math and art for middle school students. Welcome, Demetrius, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So much creativity in your story. So I imagine there'll be a lot of creativity in this conversation.
We'll see.
So Demetrius, one reason I feel so lucky to have you on the show is the compelling nature of this story. You as a teacher came up with a great idea, and this idea was refined collectively with other teachers in your school, and they became a cornerstone practice, something shared across classrooms. Could you start us off by briefly describing each of the 8 homies?
Absolutely. Okay, so there's 8 homies, as you said. They're each characters. If you want to see pictures of them, you can go to meetthehomies.com. So the first one is the brave one, who used to be called the brave artist, because like you said, I was an art teacher for 20 years. And actually, I co-created the Brave Artist before I even became a professional teacher. We were working at this program called Super Kids in Baltimore with 2 of my colleagues from Maryland Institute College of Art. And we were working in this brand new math and reading program, which I think actually is still existing. And we were trying to get kids excited about reading through art. And so one of the things we noticed with these 3rd graders, I think they were 3rd going into 4th, is they would get discouraged and they would sort of start talking negatively to themselves, like, I can't do it, I messed up. So we created this character who messes up. It's this character we made up, old Blueface, and he would start drawing and he'd crumple up his paper and say, I messed up, and he'd throw it across the room. And so by making this character who did the thing that we were trying to get them to move past, it helped them to move past. So that was the brave artist, and we used that all throughout my career being an art teacher. Then, a few years ago, which I can talk more about, when the homies started moving out of just my classroom, my art room, we changed the name from the brave artist to the brave one. Instead of saying, behold, the brave artist, We now say, "Behold the brave one." Yes. Okay. So that was the first homie. I will not give a backstory for all the other homies. That was just the first one. So then the second one, well, they're not in any order, but I'll just say them in this order. The second one is the stellar storyteller. Basically, you can explain your work or you use your work to express yourself in any
Mhm.
subject. You get your point across. And so, because rap is a form of storytelling, it's a rap, the chant. So they all have chants. So the stellar storytellers is once upon a time there was a stellar storyteller, told the story with their work and set the message into stellar. Okay, so that's the stellar. Oh, thank you. Okay, so that's the stellar storyteller. Okay, next is the eagle-eyed detective looking so closely. The eagle-eyed detective searching for clues. So that's the ability to to look very closely in any subject. Science, math, you have to be able to zoom in and you notice things that other people don't notice. A professional mathematician is going to notice something different than a professional writer is going to notice. So that's the Eagle Eye Detective. There's a lot more that I could say about that, but I'll leave it there. Then there's the Captain of the Clouds. Captain of the Clouds, use your imagination, the power of visualization. That second part was added by my illustrious homie lead teacher, Mr. F, who's a third grade teacher, and he added that part about the power of visualization. That's how his students sing it. And that is the superpower of visualizing things and using our visual memory. There's a great book called Moonwalking with Einstein, which talks about how we all have this power of visual memory that is like orders of magnitude better than our other memory, than our
Hmm.
oral memory. And so just trying to tap into that. Okay. Then there is the triple practicer. Triple practicer. The triple practicer. Triple practicer. Practice, practice, practice. And and that one is a chant, which is hard to do. You actually have to practice it in order to do it. There's a little syncopation in there, and that you embody the growth mindset. Then there's the maven. The maven wants to know more about the world. You basically nerd out about your subject and you want to tell people about it and you want to teach others. Then there's inventor, innovator, eureka. And then you make novel connections. This is the thing. We can get into that later, where we often squeeze that out sometimes because we have so much to teach in school that we sometimes forget to reward kids for having novel solutions to things. And then the last one is inspector, reflector, inspect and reflect. Ooh, and that's what, and you can change. So the inspector reflector, you could change whatever you want your chant to be, like the end of the chant. So it could be inspect and reflect. Okay, you know what I mean. You could inspect and reflect depending on what it is. So you look back at your work or you look at yourself and you see what's next and you see what's there and you reflect on it. So those are the 8 homies and their chants.
So I noticed as you were doing the chants, there's also like a physical movement that goes with each of the homies. And tell me a little bit more about how those evolved.
Absolutely. Yes. It's like trying to get the gist, trying to get the idea from an adult's head to a kid's head, basically. Like, how do we get the gist of the thing that we're describing? And I feel like motions, it sort of gets in our body. Even when I'm doing this, we actually have a song called the Whole Me song, which has it's a rap that has all of the homies together, and it's the whole me, the whole me. Um, and I think that song is linked on our website now. But
Okay.
yeah, it's the idea of like not just delivering the idea through words, but through various modalities, which for me is music, visuals, and whole body gestures.
There's research on that, and there's even like a whole language learning program, total physical response when you're learning a foreign language, like the movements that go with different words, and it really helps kids and adults remember. what you're
Yes.
trying to remember.
Absolutely.
So listeners who would like to see each of the homies and
Mhm.
hear their chants or raps, you can go to the Meet the Homies website, and I will put a link in the show notes here at the end of the show. You can check those out and check
Mhm.
out that there's actual art that goes with each of these drawings. So could you tell me a little bit more about the drawings and how those came to be?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at one right now. For example, the Brave one. So each of these drawings that you see, if you go click on the Brave one, is a drawing that matches the micro challenge. So there's three micro challenges for each homie. Basically, each there's three key three, which I can get into. For each homie, there's a key three, and for each of those key three, there's a little micro challenge, and that's a way to get the flavor of it experientially, like from the inside. And
Could
so,
you give us an example, maybe from like Eagle Eye Detective, of
oh
what
yeah,
that looks
sure.
like?
All right, clicking on Eagle Eye Detective. So you look carefully at something in the world. And so to really, there's this great book that has been around for a while now called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty
Mm.
Edwards, which is basically like, look, we can all learn to see like an artist. We can all learn to use our right brain network versus our naming left brain network to see what's actually there. It's kind of like meditation, to slow down and see what's there. And so one way to do that, I learned it in high school, but I taught it to my students, and it's now a micro challenge, is blind contour drawing. Blind means that you don't look at your paper. You only look at the thing you're drawing. If we had longer, I would take you through it and have you do it. But basically, you can do it without drawing if you want to do it like tactily. Basically, trace your own hand with your finger and feel the bumps, all the nuances. Pretend you're a little ant crawling along your finger, and you're going to notice every little nook and cranny, bump, bump. And I will guide people through this. I'll make sounds like going uphill, going around, down. It tickles.
So you're really facilitating me and noticing without visually seeing, but visually recreating in my brain what my hand looks like.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
your mind will be blown. It will probably look like spaghetti when you turn and you peek back at your paper, but you will notice the detail that you never would have drawn otherwise. And that
Mm.
actually teaches you to be a better artist. That's one of the secrets of seeing more carefully. And that can be, there's sort of metaphors in that in all subjects, ways to slow our brain down. Because I always say our brains are addicted to not texting, nexting. They're addicted to nexting, thinking about the next thing. And so this sort of tricks us and puts us back in that moment. So that's what the first micro challenge for the Eagle Eye Detective is, the blind contour drawing. So
Mm. That's thank you for that. That was really I want to go and try this and maybe see if I can stop nexting. So what inspired you initially to create and use the homies in your own art classroom?
yeah, so like I said, I had the Brave artist for years. So that was since I think in 1998 maybe. And we would give out the Brave Artist Award, and I would made up that story and I would tell that story. Similar to that book, The Dot, by there's a book called The Dot, and then there's a book called Ish by Peter H. Reynolds. The idea of stop judging yourself and just accept what you're doing, and really turn off the inner critic. So we had that for years. I had other sort of characters that I had made up, like the focused finisher, and I forget if there was a few others that I had made up. But when another art teacher from the high school introduced me to the book Studio Thinking, and I looked and it was written in 2007, but I feel like I met this book in 2010 around then, and that was a light bulb went off in my head because they talked about the idea of habits of mind. Habits of mind wasn't something that those authors. So it was Lois Hetland, Ellen Winter, and some others. They're from
And I
Project
can
Zero.
link to the book too in the
Awesome.
show notes. Yeah.
It's they're from Project Zero at Harvard, and they came up with the studio habits of mind, based on the idea of habits of mind by Art Costa and his colleagues who had been working, I think, in the early 90s. But the idea of how and habits of mind, sort of this, there wasn't always called habits of mind, but this idea that there's dispositions that transfer
Hmm.
across all subjects. Because we made up the name, we made up the delineations of subjects. We made up, well, this is math, this is history, this is science, humans, it's an artificial thing. So what are these underlying dispositions that we use? And I bet they're very similar. And I'm kind of all over the place, as you can tell from my bio and from perhaps my presentation, that I'm interested in a lot of things. So I just like the fact that you can find these dispositions that carry over across all subjects. And so that's what studio thinking came up with the studio habits of mind. They did a really good job of making their own framework, codifying those, and they had 8. And that's where I originally got the idea. But then I looked at all the subjects and I overlaid them and I sort of rearranged them and changed them, made them bigger so they could each encompass that the studio habits of mind, but also habits of mind from all the other frameworks. So
Yeah. And so one of the things it sounds like you were trying to do is to get kids to think about how art applied globally to everything that they're
yeah,
taking, whether it's science or social studies or writing.
yeah,
There is a lot of research, and you mentioned Art Costa and Project Zero, and
yeah.
really showing that habits of mind increase critical thinking and allow students to solve problems more effectively. They allow for improved mathematical reasoning. They support long term goal attainment, and they support academic achievements. I'll link to the sources where I found that research in the show notes. But Demetrius, could you tell us a bit about Sokolowski, the students you serve, and the ways in which the homies serve them?
Yes, absolutely. And that's I think I hit on that in the article that you, excuse me, the chapter that you linked to in the Designing Democratic Schools.
Mhm.
How I feel like the homies empower students, but they're sort of in a way that they're they're allowing students to see the hidden power that's already in their own minds. It's sort of giving them permission to let that power out. And so I'll just say that to start with. But so basically, like I said, we started in art class, but then I did this program called Perone Sizer Institute, which was founded by Linda Nathan. And so basically, it was a creative leadership program. It's on paper, it's for folks who want to become assistant principals or principals. I wasn't going to join, but I heard Linda Nathan, did an interview with her, and I was very impressed. And I heard that she started Boston Arts Academy, and I liked their approach, so I went to their orientation meeting, and I said, "Look, I don't know if I want to be a principal, but I know that I want to grow the homies." And something in me tells me that the homies could be used for the whole school. Maybe one day I'll start a school around the homies. I didn't know. And she said, "Well, we love the homies." She had heard of the homies, which is amazing. I think it was because the homies were in Studio Thinking 3. They had a little chapter about them in the third sequel to that book. And so basically, the whole time I was there, I wasn't really planning on being an administrator, but I was, and I was, Linda, Nathan, and that team really empowered me to meet with my principal and start spreading the homies just out of my own little sanctuary of the art room, but into the whole school and into the other subjects. And so I started meeting with my principal every week. I started, and you had to do projects and capstones where your projects were a whole school. So, and this was also the time that I had a student teacher, so I was able to every day I was able to present in classrooms while my student teacher was sort of getting ready for the day. I would do homies in the classroom. And that's where I was able to teach the homies kind of the same way we just went through the Eagle Eye Detective with the micro challenge. I was able to teach that for the students, but I also would say it's secretly for the teachers. So I would say, teachers, I say, teachers, you got to stay here. Don't go. This is not a prep. Like, stay here. And it was a way for us to all be speaking the same language. Because I feel like there's the grown up there's two, what's the word I'm looking for? There's two cultures. It's the grown-up culture and it's the kid culture, at least in elementary school. And so there's a cultural gap, there's a cultural divide. So I would try to get us all on the same page. So I would basically, when you're doing a micro challenge like that, it's hard to take yourself too seriously. So that was part of it. Of like taking the walls down and sort of like put yourself in the seat of being a learner,
Yeah,
because
remember
that's
what it was
really.
like.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm,
Because that's the real fuel that's driving all this. But I think we forget it sometimes because we're very serious.
mhm.
And I'm finding that out now that I'm an assistant principal. I'm like, you need to stop taking yourself so seriously, Demetrius. But anyway, so I felt like that sort of it gave us a shared language. We've had homie pep rallies for the MCAS. We've had homies in the gym. It sort of gives us a camaraderie, and and there's a lot of programs like this, like frameworks for character building to develop, things like respect and teamwork. But I feel like the difference is this is about empowering what's inside, the inherent power that we have in our minds, like our inherent, like, for example, inventor, innovator. Students show up to us very creative. Like I heard someone say that they're the R&D department of the human race. Kids are. Like they show up to us like this, but because we take ourselves so seriously, we do have a lot to do. We're like the parent who's in a rush. Come on, come on. And the child's like, look at this, look at this. Like, come on, let's go. Me in the morning getting my kids ready. It's right. So we're like
Yep.
that. But so the students, anyway, the homies help us to slow down and to sort of use the rest of our brain. And I feel like that empowers the students because like you said, like a lot of our students are, free or reduced lunch. There's not a lot of socioeconomic capital in this community. A lot
Mhm.
of them are immigrants or from families who are immigrants. And so the idea that they should only be complying to try to catch them up without letting themselves, their own creativity and potential shine, I think it's almost like everyone should have access to these things that sometimes are only relegated to gifted programs. So,
Yeah, so it sounds to me that the homies they create a catalyst for kids to remember how dynamic, creative,
yes.
interesting, and all
Yes.
the gifts that they bring to their own learning.
Yes. I love that. That's very well put. I'm going to quote you on that. Yes.
It's a good thing we're recording. Um, so the homies seem to evolve and spread somewhat organically at Sokolowski. And I say organically, but there was a real intentionality of you meeting with the principal. And there were some really elements put in place
Yeah.
that allowed this. I'll just say there was some criteria that had to be met for it to
Hmm.
seem organic. Could you describe the problem that the homies seemed to solve that drew
Hmm.
other teachers to act as homie ambassadors? What drew other teachers to say, yes, this is I want to be a part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one was I needed a partner who had some institutional power, but also had the openness and was inspired by homies. And that was my principal, Nate
Mm,
Myers, who I felt really did a good job of spanning the two cultures, which was one was the sort of like we're a very busy school. We have a lot of demands, both by time demands, outside demands, a lot of competing demands for time. Like, what are we going to devote this PLT to? What are we going to devote this staff meeting to? And then, so he's dealing with all of those constraints. But on the other hand, he was excited by the homies, and he could see that I was getting students and teachers excited, and he got excited. And so he advocated for it. At that point, before I was an academic coach, I wasn't in the leadership, I wasn't in the room advocating for the time. Oh, we should devote
mm,
this next week's PLT to homies. I know we have to look at data, but I also want to teach this teachers about inspector reflector, things that maybe wouldn't get addressed when everyone feels like they're in a rush and they're very busy. So Nate Myers really advocated for that and sort of was able to speak the two languages. And then the other thing is we sort of went like, I don't know what you would say, we branched. So it was like
mm.
me, then it was Nate and me, and then there were the ambassadors, and it was 10 ambassadors, and we tried to get them so they were at each grade level. My school, we only have four grades, first, second, third, and fourth. So we had first grade ambassadors, second, third, and fourth grade ambassadors, and also some specialists and some coaches. and their
Okay.
job was to maybe be a little ahead of the learning curve and to spread it and to disseminate to the people when they're in their grade level planning teams. So if they're looking ahead and they're planning for the next week and they say, oh, that's the stellar storyteller. When we talk about natural disasters, explaining the causes of natural disasters, that's the students being stellar storytellers. And so they were there to sort of overlay the homie language onto the planning that was already happening. And slides, like we do a lot of slides, grade level teams share slides. So if one teacher has great slides about, the stellar storyteller in their lesson, even when a teacher's in a rush, they can use that. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit. Like the low hanging fruit was like introducing the homey language into objectives. I will be a stellar storyteller and explain the causes of earthquakes, and then examples in their lesson plan and in their slides. So they it kind of spread like that. And then teachers, we actually have creative teachers. At least we have a few creative teachers in each grade level, and it was almost like FOMO. We leveraged FOMO a little. Like this is really fun. Look how excited I am. And by the way, when students are excited, that's really good behavior management because they're not doing something else when they're excited.
Right.
So we did that, right? And when I was still the art teacher, I was giving homie badges. I guess I got to talk about the badges and the cards. So when I was an art teacher, I was giving homie badges to the students. So they're walking around, right? So if your
Yeah.
students are walking around with this badge, I made an unexpected connection. I'm an inventor innovator, then people see that. So that's back to that FOMO. And then we had homie school meetings, which were a raucous affair. There's homie songs, and so I think it built. It was almost like it was building excitement from the bottom up and from the top down. Yeah.
Sounds to me like teachers had
Mhm.
the collective planning time to bring homies into their academic content, and it gave them language to explain the academic skill that students would need
Yes.
to show. There was this I've got a badge, tell me about your badge kind of excitement. There was the whole school assemblies where kids got to do the raps or the songs. There was real investment and recognition by the principal. And part of it was you as a teacher got people excited about it before you even had your principal excited by these badges. Like there's this cool thing happening in this room and kids like it.
Yes. Yes.
It empowers them. I want to empower my kids too. I see a way.
Yes, exactly. That's very, very well summarized. Yeah. And three badge. So basically, we have badge trackers, and when a student exhibits one of those qualities, and they can earn a badge. And if you earn three of the same badge, you get the card, which look like playing cards. They're actually modeled after Pokemon cards. This was our MLE coach's idea to make them look like Pokemon cards. They're
Oh, so they have
amazing.
hit points.
The- See, I don't. You know more about Pokemon than I do. Yes.
My daughter's really into Pokemon.
Well, instead of hit points, they have the key three on the back. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, yeah.
Less violent.
Right. um, so it's one by one you earn the badges. One by one you earn the cards. Collect all eight, and pretty soon you are the whole me. And so,
Whole me.
yeah,
Okay.
yes, exactly. So last year we had about, I would say, 6 to 8 kids in the whole school earn the whole me, versus the year before I think it was two or three. So each year it becomes kind of more because it takes a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, that's 3 times 8, that's 24 badges that you earned. And then there's level two and all that. So
Yeah. Well, and to get to the whole me, you have to diversify. You can't just be all eagle-eye detective. You actually have to also try to be a maven. And yeah.
exactly. Yes. Yes.
When you were trying to implement the homies school-wide, what were some of the biggest successes?
I think the biggest success is teachers doing this without my, like when the car starts to drive itself. We would start each ambassador meeting by sharing your homie wins, share an idea from what you or your grade level team has done, and they're quite amazing. Oh man, there's a fourth grade teacher who was an ambassador who took the stellar. One of the things that we did that I created because I realized academic talk, APT, academically productive talk, turn and talk, academic discourse, like that's something that we're trying to build. We have a lot of language learners in our school of various levels, and also if you can advocate for yourself, that's how you rise above and you change the world. And that's really what that's in that article for Kaplan. I sort of said that I feel like, at least for my school, the most important homie is stellar storyteller. And to just like, we say less, they say more, and they're empowered to be able to express themselves. So we had this, I made this video, I animated the Eagle Eye Detective and the Stellar Storyteller. So basically, they're doing a turn and talk. So the Stellar Storyteller is explaining something. In this example, it's just my favorite animal. And the Eagle Eye Detective is listening closely. And we had a lot of versions of that. And the teachers did it. The teachers acted it out, where one teacher would be the Stellar Storyteller, one would be the Eagle Eye Detective, and then the students would act it out, and it increased their return and talks. And I had one fourth grade teacher who really just took it to a whole nother level, and it became self-sufficient, which is always the best thing, where you can say you've built this routine, and then you watch it happen.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do her process justice, but there was a lot of other protocols built into that, like building on somebody, respectfully disagreeing, and she'd give half the students a stellar storyteller card and half of them an eagle eye detective, and eventually they would just be going like I
I
said,
see.
like the
So there
car
were
was
like
burning.
certain habits that they had to
Yes,
show in the turn and talk that made them an
yes,
eagle eye detective or a
mm,
stellar storyteller. And it was lifted up for them so they could practice it. So they could be
exactly.
what's the practice practice, homie?
Triple practicer,
Triple
triple
practicer.
practicer.
Yeah. So
Yes,
they're
exactly. You're
triple
becoming home.
practicing. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And another huge win was not my idea. Again, that's the best one. It's the grade level team. The fourth grade team did a pep rally for MCAS. We always have so MCAS is our standardized test that we do every year
Yeah.
for third and fourth grade and up, but our school only goes to fourth. We do a pep rally every year, but this one was a homies pep rally. So each of the eight, there were eight teachers, including like the fourth grade classroom teachers and the MLEs and the special ed teachers. They eight of them dressed up as each of the homies,
Oh
and they
wow.
yeah, in the gym with the whole fourth grade, and then we did it with the third grade the following year. And they said, "Hi, I'm the Eagle Eye Detective. When you take the MCAS, make sure you zoom in and look closely at what the question is asking." And then the next one would come. And so the teachers were dressed up as the homies, telling the students how to activate them. And then we said, pretend as you're taking the MCAS, pretend the homies are on your shoulders and they're telling you, they're helping you through this, giving you that positive talk with tangible strategies. One of them was like, yeah, use the three reads. When you read a problem, read it three times. Once to get the gist, once to see what it's asking, and once to see, I'm not sure if I'm quoting it right, but to see what you need to do, what operations you need to do. So,
Yeah. So the homies are lifting up the metacognitive steps to really do the work. You're thinking about thinking. I'm thinking that in order to be successful, I have to do A, B, and C
yes,
in order
yes,
to do this.
yes,
Okay.
exactly,
So it's
exactly.
really giving kids a window into how practitioners think. So
Right.
I imagine that, with any initiative, there's some hiccups along the way or a little tripping or some setbacks or challenges. What were some of the challenges you faced and as a school, as a team who was working on the homies, and what did you do about that?
Okay, so one challenge that comes to mind is, well, first is just teacher buy-in. Just again, trying to sell this as not just another thing, but that you're overlaying it onto what you're already doing, but it's going to give you this language that will make things easier and it will make it land in with your students better. So, like with any language, there is a learning curve. So, when you first hear it, that's eight homies. That's a lot of homies,
Mhm.
right? So, we learn to sort of give them like people who are new to the school, to give them starter homies. So, one of the easiest ones to start with is brave one. Just be brave. Hey, you're a brave one. You try new things. I think one of the other easy ones that they did were triple practicer,
Mhm.
right? And then I think another one is eagle eye detective. If the student notices something. So those are kind of the starter homies, and to just let teachers know that there might be a little bit of a learning curve, like with any language, but once you become fluent enough, the language makes it easier, not harder. So, and then we've had teacher turnover, so you have to differentiate when you do PD on the homies. We sort of started to tier them. And so, like I said, for newer teachers, is like kind of like, here's the posters, put the posters on your wall, here's the badges. You might only end up giving a Brave One badge. Whereas then other teachers who are here for more than 3 years, who have sort of started to use the homies, they will need sort of the deeper homies. We need to sort of elaborate more about the key three, and they might have a reading during a PD. There might be a reading to do on a homie based on one of the books. The homies. I call them the homie books. So there's like key books that I like to quote from when we're going deeper into the homies. And then, of course, with things like PLT and ambassadors, keep giving folks a chance to share what they're doing. Um, with the newer folks. Like, oh, I have this I use this homie in this lesson and it works really well. And low hanging fruit, here's the slide that you can insert in your slideshow and try it out. So a lot of sharing, letting teachers share what they've done so that the veteran teachers can share with the newer teachers.
So there was some scaffolding
Yes.
to learn the 8 homies. Like just start
Yes.
small. You learn 1% about a homie each day and you're fluent by the
Yep.
end of the
Yep.
year. There's differentiation for
Hmm.
different groups who are learning the homies and deepening their learning. And then you also have this collective learning of teachers sharing best practice or ideas behind the homies and sharing resources. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and then one other thing that I'll briefly, say is when I moved out of the classroom, I no longer had as much time with the students to teach them. So the homies. So last year we created I don't know if I mentioned this, but last year we created a brand new position that had never existed before, and this was a testament to the partnership with my principal and I. It was an academic coach. So we have an ELA coach, a math coach, an MLE coach, which is a multilingual educator coach. We created a new position called the homie coach or the homie integration coach. So for the first time after 20 years, I was out of my classroom and I was going into the classrooms and I was observing teachers and I would give them feedback through the homies. And I'd say, oh, that was really cool. Did you know actually right there that students were being a maven? And here's how you could help. Here's how you could integrate that. And so I would put that into my feedback. And then this year, as assistant principal, I have a lot more responsibilities besides just observing teachers. So I still use the homies in my observations and my feedback, but that's why I work closely with Mr. F. Joel Fagerberg is an amazing third grade teacher, and he's the homie lead. So, and he's there, yeah. So he's really taking the lead now on all the professional development. And I did feel at the beginning of this year, I was like, man, are the homies losing ground, losing steam? But I feel like we worked hard this year to make it more tangible. So we use two curricula. One's called Fish Tank Learning, that's our ELA curriculum, and the other is Illustrative Math, which is our math. And so this year we did more discrete, specific examples of applying the homies to each grade level and what they're teaching right then, which I think helped. And I feel like the homies have, like, if they had fallen behind a little bit, they've more than caught up right now. So
Who is actively looking at those curriculums and helping the homies live in there? Is this your Mr. F, your third grade teacher, or is it
yeah,
all the teachers?
it's all the teachers. Yes. So
Yeah.
we still have the homie ambassadors this year. So they're still looking at that, the curriculum and how things overlay. I think it's built into all the teachers and their planning. We have a lesson planning document, and an element of the lesson planning document is the homies, and how do the homies apply to this lesson and the objectives. So that's sort of built into the process. It's also in our AIP, our academic improvement plan, where the homies and sort of this whole process that I have described about disseminating the homie the information and the professional development, that's built into the academic improvement plan. And I just think, like, yeah, even if I'm not pushing, there is still an authentic enthusiasm and there's a momentum for the homies and all. They're using it no matter what. So
it's percolating through all the different parts of the school building, through the
Yes.
curriculum. It's a part of the culture. This is how we, this is how we do things here, the homies.
Mm, yes, you got it. That's so funny that you said that, because that was like when I first started meeting with Nate Myers 3 years ago. That was one of the things that we said. What do we need to do where one day the homies will just be part of the Sokolowski way? And they are.
And it sounds like you're there, and there's more to be done always.
Yeah.
Um, so the homies really created this identity for the school, this way of doing and being together. Like, we
Mm,
are these 8 homies. And the
mhm,
solution really was, they were created, but it's how do you get everybody, and you use the word buy-in, but I
mm,
would argue that you now have commitment. And
mm.
buy-in, like I'm selling you something, but commitment is, I'm committed to getting the homies, and helping kids find that little trigger of what's already inside them to be who they are, right? The
Yes.
homie. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Very
um,
well said.
you know that this podcast is about the collective efficacy, and I have a deep-seated belief that the best solutions come from the people who work with the kids on the ground and know the context. And so, how have the homies increased? And collective efficacy is the belief, right? The belief that we have what it takes in this building to serve these first through fourth graders and help them learn the English language, be good
Mm,
at math, be good
mm.
citizens, all of those pieces that you're trying to instill in them. So, how have the homies increased the collective belief that we have what it takes to teach all of our students at Sokolowski?
I think that you see it. I think one thing you've seen is like, I mean, for me personally, it's, I call it the love language. We've created our own love language, so I can't walk through the hallway without a student stopping me and saying, "Mr. G, I earned," and they'll tell me what they earned, and they'll tell me how they earned it. They associate me with the homies. Although now it's more and more they're associating Mr. F with the homies, which is amazing. I think that our teachers, I don't know. I think it takes a special kind of teacher to work in my school, especially moving into assistant principal and having to do the hiring. We've got a teacher shortage now, and having to do the hiring because we faced a unique situation where my principal, Nate, went to the middle school at the end of last year, and then the assistant principal went on paternity leave. So I was sort of tasked with doing the hiring towards the end of the year. And there weren't nearly as many applicants as before. And we don't pay as much as Boston. And so I feel like we're getting known for being who we are. And one of the aspect of that is that we love this authentically. And the homies are a manifestation of that we feel the joy of learning and the joy of teaching. And I feel like the homies manifest that. A fourth grade student said, when asked what was the difference between the pyramid of success, which is the character building framework that we use, which is amazing, but it's different. And what's the difference between the pyramid of success and the homies? They said the pyramid of success is, what do they say? And you earn swag tags for the pyramid of success. The swag tags are for what you do. The homies are for what you are.
Mm.
So I thought it was quite deep, but right? That the whole, I mean, you should see, honestly, it's not just the students doing the whole me when we're all together, it's the teachers doing it too. And that really embodies it. Take all of this external stuff, it's all here, it's right here,
Mhm.
and it's been there all along. And that's kind of the lesson of the homies. And I feel like we feel that. And I think it takes a special teacher and really dedicated teacher. We have two robust curricula that I mentioned, which are great, but they're a lot. It's really hard to be a first year teacher at our school because the learning curve is so high. But once you get that, you're triple practicer, once you can internalize the languages that we have, you're so empowered and you have so much power at your fingers to learn and teach. And I see that happening. It's unbelievable. I'm not, it sounds corny, but I teared up when I was observing a teacher a few weeks ago. I was like, am I crying? Because the way she was talking about the lesson, it was a math lesson. They were doing a number talk from illustrative math, but the way she was saying, okay, now be an eagle eye detective and zoom in. And it wasn't just because like, oh, she's doing the homies. It was just the way it was done it was so rigorous but so joyful. And
And it
it's
was an
this amazing.
authentic, she was authentically doing it because she knew it.
Exactly. So once you can get to that level, it's hard. It's hard to learn
Yeah.
languages, but once you can get fluent enough it's a joyful experience.
Thank you. That was lovely. Any next steps with the homies in support of sustaining them at Sokolowski?
Yeah, I mean, Joel, Mr. F, and I meet every week. Um, we plan professional development. We just did homies in the gym again, where we have we go grade level by grade level. Last one we focused on what did we focus on? It was the Stellar Storyteller, and basically we played a game show like 80s style, and it was called "What's That Called?" And it was a slideshow that one of the ambassadors had made up, and basically you had teachers sitting with their back and the screen behind them, and random objects. It might be category food. It might have been like Takis, a candy bar. And then the students, one student had like their own grade level student. So a first grade student had to tell a first grade teacher, like, okay, it's purple, it comes in a bag, they're really spicy. And it was sort of like charades or Pictionary, but it was to get the idea of a stellar storyteller. So we like to gamify things wherever we can, and that was
Yeah.
just in November. This is the kind of thing that we like to do. And Mr. F, again, I'm really excited because he has I see it like visually, like the homies are kind of a mind map, and it's like they're these buckets that are overarching, but when you're a teacher on the ground, you have the specific lesson, the specifics of the curricula and how they apply. So I feel like the homies mind map is getting populated more and more on the bottom. And Mr. F and I are working on the homie handbook. We're very excited. That's sort of our pie in the sky dream for this coming year is to work on the homie handbook to sort of compile all this.
And the audience of the Homie Handbook are students, teachers, families.
I think the audience mostly would be teachers and administrators for the handbook, for the homie handbook, the first book, and maybe parents, adults too. Yeah, it's like basically how to do what we're doing, how to take an idea from up here and make it stick and make it work and become, as you said, part of the culture of the school.
In background, when you and I were talking offline, you said that you were more of an associative, responsive thinker, and that this is in contrast to the more concrete, sequential thinking that is often selected for in leadership positions. What are some of the ways this type of thinking has supported you in your new role as assistant principal?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's made it hard in many ways, like especially where I'm at that part of the learning curve where I'm learning all of these discrete things. So I feel like I'm time blind. So, not to rely overly on labels, but like I have attention deficit disorder, ADHD, and I've always had it, and I have it now, and I'm convinced it's the reason that the homies exist because of that sort of metaphorical associative mind. But it's also the reason like I struggled with school, not with the academics, but sort of call it behavior, but it wasn't behavior. It was just like he's not trying as hard as he's forgetting things. They call me the absent-minded professor,
Like
because
the executive functioning part, where it's like getting your homework and turning things in on time and being ready for
yes,
deadlines. Okay.
right. I really struggle with that. Now I've put a lot of systems in place, including, by the way, the homies. I feel like the homies were an accommodation that I created for myself because they're a mind map, and that helps me to sort of keep things categorized. And I call Mr. F my CEFO, my Chief Executive Function Officer, which is one of the reasons we're a great team. Uh, um, And obviously I have to, I 504'd myself. I've had to make up my own accommodations and seek help with getting accommodations. I see a ADHD coach once every other week who's amazing. Shout out to Drummer in the Great Mountain, which is a great book. So I don't like, I'm happy that I have the brain that I do, but it definitely makes it difficult. I think that, I don't know, it absolutely lets me see outside of the box, outside of the way things currently are. Because I can't keep track of the specifics as much, they are not preoccupying my mind as much. So my mind is free to wander for better and definitely for worse. But because it's free to wander all the time, it's still making those connections that the other folks in the room might not be making.
So one of the big benefits is that you see things differently and can make connections that other people who think sequentially are just like
Yes.
A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D. And you're like, what about F? Right?
Right. Yes. Or
Okay.
seven.
Or seven, or
Right. Like,
triangles.
not right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So.
So you are a Perone Sizer Institute for Creative Leadership graduate. As you said, that's a program started by Linda Nathan.
Yes.
And their
currently
website.
run by it's currently run by Sunny Pie and Will C, who are amazing. I actually just
Okay.
joined their board. I've just joined their board, and I'm going to an event with them tomorrow. They're an amazing. They really do live up to their name of creative leadership. So
So what this goes to this quote is that they're encouraging leaders to access inspiration, utilize creativity, design thinking, risk taking, and experimentation to solve complex problems. Artists persist and consider, refine, and illuminate many different approaches. So, they're encouraging leaders like you who
yes,
are like, what about seven?
yes.
Um, and they're saying, we need more leaders like this. So what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your role right now, and how are you tackling it using some of this artistic creative thinking?
Yeah, I mean, right now, just in terms of like time, I mean, there's so many hats you wear as an assistant principal, working with staff and the fact that we have a lot of new staff and even more positions. And each all I feel like all positions are more difficult now than they were 5 years ago. And part of that is just like the rigor of everything. I feel
Mm.
like we adopted a lot of practices during COVID and we kept them. We're on screens all the time. We pay so much more attention to data now, which helps students not to fall through the cracks. The rigor has been raised, but it's demanding on folks and it's a lot to learn. And so I think trying to stay calm with all that, people do tell me that I'm calm as a leader. And I don't know if that's just again my sort of ability to sort of like forget things for a moment, but it's been a lot. And then having to evaluate teachers multiple times a year. I think it's 4 or 5 times for new educators. I try to look at it through the lens of the homies. So I'm bucketing things through the homies. I'm sharing some of those best practices with teachers. We have been trying to encourage writing and leveraging oral language to improve written language. I learned a new word, oralcy, which is, I guess, being fluent in oral language. So leveraging oralcy to help with literacy. We have these writing contests monthly that we do the homies. So basically, we use the homies as they can get a special limited edition badge if they win. If it's the spooky storyteller, they won that in October. It was a different chant. It was once upon a time there was a spooky storyteller, and then there was the thankful reflector, which was they had to do an essay on thankful on what they were thankful for, and now there's the Martin Luther King writing contest, and that's the brave builder. So we make these bespoke homie cards for the winners of that. So I'm trying to leverage that sort of keep the joy and the fun, while with all of these sort of concrete demands of being an administrator.
So the
Um,
big challenge is really that there's just so much that you're trying to accomplish all the time, and the rigor's gone up. And a
yes.
big piece of the creative artistic thinking is to helping people remember the joy of teaching and learning.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it. You got it.
So what are some of the reasons you chose a career in education? What brought you to your first job, first role as an educator?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we often become the grown up that we wish we had. So when I was a kid, I went to a different school every year.
Mm,
So first of all, I would often find myself in trouble because I was spacey, and so I would forget things, and I think that was before people understood that it wasn't willful. They didn't understand what attention deficit was because they didn't understand what attention was. Like there's so much research now that people who pay attention, the reason they pay attention is because they're getting that slow release of dopamine in their brain to stay with the same thing. And people who don't are getting the dopamine from going to a different thing. And so back then they were still applying these moral kind of judgments on people who weren't
mm,
paying attention as much. And I think that as a kid with ADHD, it gets into you. And so you kind of feel like you're in trouble all the time. And so I don't think I would have become a teacher if I hadn't become an art teacher. I got to stay outside a little. Um, but I knew that I loved kids. I kind of am a kid and I loved art. And I remember when I was in high school, I was like, maybe I'll be an architect or an engineer. But then I was still thinking about like the balance of what to make money with. But I remember being in a senior and it's like, no, I'm just going to do what I love to do. And so that's when I decided to go to art school. And then when I went to art school, they had a program for art teaching. And so that kind of has how that became my trajectory. But again, I was always the new kid, kind of the odd kid, the different kid in my school. But I always had deep interests of my own. And it was almost like I was finding those interests on my own except for my second grade teacher, Mrs. Westmoreland. I was interested in whatever she was interested in. That was when I got into, I don't know, I remember that was the year we raised chicks. We had frogs. She taught us origami. I would stay after school. It was like, you know, but then I went to another school and it was back to the same old thing. And so I think I just tried to be the person that I wished I had as a
mm.
kid.
Yeah. So you wanted to insert in the system something that wasn't wasn't there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to say. I think that the reason the homies are as successful as they are is because they were developed by me. It was almost like they were co-created by me and students in the art room, where administrators don't always know what to look for, so they kind of left me alone. There's no test. I was making it up. I was experimenting as I went along. Like the level of freedom that I had in the art room was way higher than the other teachers had or have. And I don't think that the homies would have come to fruition if I hadn't had that freedom and that laboratory vibe with the students to keep trying things and iterations upon iterations. I mean, because I would teach the same thing 5 times. So I don't think the homies ever would have been born if it hadn't been for that laboratory of the art room.
So teaching a non-tested subject gave you full latitude.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just think that's a good message for us to think about. Like, this is great what we're doing. We're doing what has been devised and decided. We're doing it with rigor, but we are kind of squeezing out the time for experimentation. The time there's less time for like serendipitous connections to be made. So
Thank you, Demetrius, for joining us today and sharing your journey toward collective efficacy at Sokolowski and so much more. If you'd like to contact Demetrius, you can find him on his email. He is fullerd@chelseaschools.com. That's FULLERD as in Demetrius at chelseaschools.com. Demetrius, thanks again. I couldn't have had a better conversation on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you.
oh my gosh, so enjoyable. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure. Thank
Cheers to
you.
you and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you for listening. I hope today's episode leaves you feeling empowered and optimistic about solving even the toughest of challenges with your own team. If you enjoyed the episode, help us grow and reach more listeners by 1, sharing the podcast, 2, subscribing so you never miss an episode, and 3, leaving us a review. I promise to read and respond to everyone. Your support means so much. Thanks again, and see you next time on the Efficacious Educator Podcast.